Hello, everybody. I just wanted to kind of put this little video out there as kind of another way to promote the Black Tree book that I recently wrote. I wanted to give a little bit of backstory about it if that might help people get interest or at least maybe some context. Maybe a little before they read it or maybe better after. I'd prefer people just kind of read it for what it is. But I just kind of wanted to talk about it because it's this interesting thing. Like, basically, I've always kind of enjoyed writing. And I liked reading a lot. Obviously, it's something I guess I was kind of adept at, or just really liked. I was pretty good at it growing up, and I wanted to write early on. Was something that I really wanted to kind of pursue, just in general, because I have this great love for storytelling, and one of the great mediums is just through the word, through novels and short stories, and of course everything that transfers on to comics and movies and whatnot. And a lot of that comes from writing, obviously. And but I wanted to write, and I wasn't really sure about how exactly to go about it in terms of doing it as a career or anything. And I admit that kind of in college that was sort of my vague focus, but I didn't exactly know, and I got a little bit discouraged. I'll back up a little bit, but basically the origin of the Black Tree was I had written a little bit, but I always considered myself to be a writer, but in like a good number of years ago, I kind of got to a point where I kind of felt like that was a little weird for me to say that. Like, I liked thinking of myself as a writer, but I didn't really actually write that much. I mean, I wrote a couple short stories, middle school and high school, that I was okay with, but after that, I didn't really write. I wrote a couple in college, maybe just for myself that I didn't really do a lot with. I know I submitted one. That I don't think I got a lot. I got some feedback about that didn't really encourage me too much in my first or second year of college. But the thing was, I kind of still wanted to pursue that because I felt passionate about it and I felt like there was something there. But I needed to do more of it, and I just didn't exactly know what the direction was with that. And well, kind of speeding up here a little bit. Basically, I I got a lot of inspiration in probably about 10 years ago or so because a good buddy of mine got me into Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop RPGs, mostly Pathfinder's what I played. My buddy Troy, you've seen on the channel, and he kind of got me into that, and I think just the combination of really just being around a lot of those different stories and interacting with my friends, just different players and different adventures we came up with, and seeing everybody kind of nurture that creativity and that everybody kind of had that and how they interacted and how you can kind of create something new. It could be like a whole new video about Dungeons and Dragons, I guess, and just tabletop stuff in general. But it's something that did kind of, I guess, inspire me to sort of do a fantasy adventure. I don't know if it really was any direct campaigns or anything. I don't even know if it was exactly like Dungeons and Dragons specifically, but I know that doing it definitely helped cultivate and inspire that and get a lot of the creative juices flowing, because before that I really hadn't had a chance to kind of exercise those mental muscles, really just taking on a bigger epic story. I mean, I written a couple short stories, and I'd always would play around with like little kind of fan fiction imagination things in my head since I was a kid, like random Dragon Ball Z idea or something. You just kind of run off with it and have fun with it, and then you forget about it. Always did a lot of that, but my ideas were always all over the place, and I could never really focus that much on it. And maybe it's an attention span thing. I know that because I'm kind of a slow reader, actually. It's gotten worse, to be honest. So I don't know if I'd be particularly quick, but that's okay. Basically around 2011, I got this idea where, like, you know what, I want to try and write a fantasy novel, and that was about it. And I decided, okay, I've got like these general characters, and I know generally what's going to happen. And I remember I wrote, I think, the first 2 chapters. I wrote about 2 chapters of it, and I got the whole. So, and that's the only thing. It's obviously not word for word exactly the same, but like I knew, I changed a lot of stuff in the second chapter because like I don't think I did it well at all the first time. But the basic idea of the introductions for the 2 characters you see, which is the first 2 chapters of the book, really, Lorne and then Reyna, is pretty much the same generally. I definitely played around a lot more with the flashbacks and kind of taking my time introducing Raina. And I remember at one point I said I think they went into, I went a little bit more into what her family did, and I cut to a scene where they went off lumbering or something, and it just didn't really. I was like, well, why don't I'm moving too fast. I should take some time with her in a scene reflecting, and I tried to get through that too fast and get to the action. It's like I felt very uncomfortable sitting quietly with the character and trying to flesh out those moments. I was like, it can't be boring, right? So that was one thing where it's like I just was like, I didn't want to sit too long with any of those scenes. Though the Lorne stuff was pretty similar, though I think it was by a lake instead of a river the first time, and I don't know. It's like I don't even remember exactly what it was, but basically I wrote those first two, and I kind of liked the way it was going, but I never got to the point where those two characters interacted because I was typing on a really old computer at my mom's house. This is back when I was in college, and this was just like this old one that I was just using for word processing. Wasn't even connected to the internet or anything. Like, I don't know how old this computer was, but it was just like, I don't know. I don't even know exactly what happened to it, but it just felt kind of cool to write it on an old computer. I don't know. Might have been silly, but basically that for some reason that it just like fried. It got lost, and I got so discouraged about that. I'm like, and I hate that. I don't know if anybody ever like works on any piece of any kind, whenever you worked on a project or whatever it is, and you get far along and then you lose it or it gets completely messed up and you got to start over. Oh, it's frustrating when that happens. It's just like, try to move on. But especially when you put a lot of thought and detail into something, it's like that's why you got to have backups and savings. That's one of the first lessons I learned is like you got to kind of go with the inspiration when you have it, but also make sure you got a backup. But for whatever reason, I kind of like got a little discouraged with that, and I sort of lost interest. And then the sad thing was, I think the combination of the D&D stuff with I actually decided to become an English major in college and focused a lot on literature and studying storytelling and different thematic analysis and themes and background and different tropes and techniques and just talking about stories really and interpreting them and discussing them. But I didn't really get to write too many of my own throughout most of it. It was mostly just read the text and discuss it, make a paper about it, research something about it, prove a point. Good stuff. I really loved it actually, and I really do. That was basically it. I wanted to kind of flesh that out. And I do think that helped me to, I guess I always, like most people do, I had a sense of general appreciation for stories. And I certainly like to think about things and character motivations. And then later on, especially with movies and stuff, like the way things were shot and performances. But that did provide like a lot of background and different ways of looking at things that I never thought of and really sharpened my analytical skills and thinking about how stories work and how to break them down. But it was really more just about how they made me feel and the general effect they had, and that's kind of something I wanted to try to convey too. But I didn't really write too much until like the last semester that I really had in my full year of college, and I had a fiction class and a nonfiction class, and I did pretty well in both of them, though I think I actually did better at nonfiction, so I probably should do more blogging and maybe like a memoir or something. I don't know, but we'll see. But the thing was, fiction, of course, is what I really want to do because it's more interesting. And I loved my fiction class. It was basically about writing short stories, and I learned a lot from that class. My Professor Connolly, was really good. He was a published author himself. I felt like he knew a lot, had a lot of good advice. But it got me really like amped up, and I felt like the story that I wrote, which is the whole thing, is the ultimate final project is to kind of like finish the final draft of your short story that you've kind of put through the process a couple times. And I think I definitely improved because the hard thing about that class, which the professor definitely did intentionally, was it couldn't be speculative. Like it couldn't be fantasy, sci-fi, or horror really. It had to be kind of grounded. And so it was like, it was tougher in a way because you had to kind of really dive a bit deeper and try to make the words work well without relying on fun tropes like that, which he didn't think that stuff was bad, but I do think it's kind of a good test of like writing to tell a story without those things. So I don't know if I'll do that again, to be honest, because I just want to write like science fiction and fantasy. But the thing is, I do think that for people that want to do that, since you want to have characters you're connected to, like with any story, you want to really feel like they're actual people going through things you can relate to and make it very relevant and impactful. And to do that, it's like best to try and ground it as much as you can, even if you got those fantastical tropes. So it was actually a good process, but I think I got like a B on the final thing, which obviously isn't bad. And he gave me some good feedback, and it was mostly because I was writing about well, what else would I write about that I thought I could relate to? I guess a writer who is struggling with, which I still had it, I'd share it. Struggling to, because he wrote, like a book he wrote, or is going to be, he submitted it to, I guess, a movie studio or something to be adapted, but they were going to change a lot of things, and they wouldn't like go through with the deal or something. And the sad thing is, it was the whole artistic dilemma, which he appreciated, but he'd actually had more experience with publishing, so he knew that like I clearly didn't know what I was talking about with some of it, and I think that was the big issue. And so I'm like, yeah, I should have just done more research. And the sad thing was, at that point I never really tried to publish anything in any case, let alone wrote a whole lot really of anything like that. So that was the biggest weakness. But that kind of discouraged me a little, but not that much. And then it was just kind of combined with the fact that like the last time I saw him, overheard him say something about there's no money in fiction, and I could just tell he was disgruntled because I guess he'd written a couple books at that point, and maybe at the time he wasn't feeling like that was like a bit of a disappointment. I don't know. I interpreted a lot and projected a lot, and that affected me. And then I got really bummed out for years after that. Kind of rough for me after college for a couple years, just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I didn't write anything really at all for 3 years, except for through YouTube, writing scripts for my videos, which was something I kind of got into towards the end of college, which was good as a creative outlet, which I've been doing on here for a while. I'm going to take some of the stuff I learned in college about analyzing stories and fiction, themes, characters, tropes, and that sort of stuff, and apply it to things I like that people don't talk about quite as much, at least not at that time, like comic books and anime specifically. People weren't really doing that that I saw at the time. So other than that, I didn't really write that much. And I don't know exactly what it was that got me to want to write more again, but I think it was just kind of I think it's when I put up the site and I realized I could kind of do a blog. I'm like, maybe I could put some of my fiction up here. And I don't know, I just felt like I hadn't really written anything in a while, and I somehow got the inspiration to start doing it. And then I started writing short stories. And actually, I backtrack, I didn't start with it immediately, but another important part of this, which I actually want to get into more, I think, when I'm going to try and get the short story collection out there too, because the funny thing is, and it's a running joke. I think I'm just going to kind of keep trying to push. I don't know if anybody's going to think it's funny, but the truth is that I really like writing short stories, and that's something I feel like I've gotten better at. And in a lot of ways, trying to get this fantasy novel done and out there, The Black Tree, is really just kind of a sort of a little excuse to put together the short story collection and get that out there. And that Honey Lemon, my fiance, I actually said, I want to get my short stories out there and just put them in a collection. I'll just do that. That'll be what I publish first. And she's like, well, I think typically, you want to be an established author and have like at least one novel out before you do a collection of short stories and be established, right? And I'm like, so that was another thing too. That was another thing that kind of got me to do it. But backing up, what kind of started me writing short stories a bit was just the fact that I got introduced through a troll again, and my other buddy Adam Bombo, A-Bomb, from some of our weird rap videos. They both kind of got me into Robert E. Howard, and I think it was Troll had let him borrow a short story collection. I actually think I have it. I think I have it. Yeah, I have it. I'm going to show this off. And he actually gave it, he let him borrow that, and then he gave it to me, and it was actually this. It was Robert E. Howard's Call Exile of Atlantis. And I really wasn't that familiar with Robert E. Howard. Like I read, I actually never read anything of his. I learned later on, I heard a little bit that he was the guy that made Conan the Barbarian, and but I'll admit I was kind of like, wasn't interested in Conan the Barbarian. I was like, that seems silly. I knew about the Arnold movie, and I'm like, it's like, which is cool in retrospect. I actually appreciate a lot now, but at the time I was a bit like resistant to it. Like, that's, I want to be a serious writer, you know. Oh man, I'm trying to embrace more fun, I guess. But like, look, I fell in love with this character. I fell in love with this character, and I'm going to talk about this in another video when I get the short stories out. I think if you people are interested to hear this, but yeah, I'm not going to undersell it here. I loved this collection, and of course I was into Lovecraft a bit too, but it was Robert E. Howard specifically, the Cull short stories, and later on, I guess I had some downtime sometimes when I was working in the writing center as a tutor. I think being around writing and stuff kind of got me, and helping people with their writing sort of inspired me too. Seeing other people do stories. I don't know. I was around a lot of creative elements between D&D and writing in college, and then finally working with other people working around writing, and then, the blog and stuff. I don't know. A lot of things kind of came together that were sort of like gently pushing me in a way that I didn't even realize. But yeah, that was kind of the spark a couple years before, like around the time, a little after college, I started reading that. And that came back to me when I started reading some of the Conan stories, but also Solomon Kane. And when I finally checked out Solomon Kane, and Troll had let me borrow this movie that I didn't watch for like 2 years, and then I finally did. But then I read the short stories, and so between Cull and Solomon Kane, and eventually a little bit of Conan, I just realized that I really liked Robert E. Howard's writing style. Like my favorite writer, at least in terms of like the traditional classics, is probably Ernest Hemingway. And I want to try and write different styles. Like hopefully my next novel, I want to write it differently. Like I think Black Tree is sort of a bit simplistic, and admittedly that was kind of intentional, with trying to kind of keep like quick paced action, and really try to focus on simple but effective sentence structure to convey what you need to convey without going into too much detail. Because I guess I could go into more detail in future books, and people let me know about really creating like the details for the like the backgrounds, and painting the canvas of everything. But I kind of want people to sort of use their imaginations, and like for me it was like writing this book was like, okay, I've gotten enough practice writing a lot of short stories, and I used, admittedly, I kind of felt like Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, I kind of sort of honestly imitated their writing style a little bit, and then kind of combined that with just sort of the Hemingway sensibilities, which I always liked, and it just works for me. It's very easy for me to write that way, and it got me to the point where I felt like I could flesh characters out and complete stories in a smaller format that I was pretty happy with, and I just enjoyed doing them, and I could do them. I kept doing them, and I had like a decent amount, at least a dozen of them. And I also combined that with some of the old sci-fi stuff I liked, like the old Isaac Asimov short stories I liked, and some of the Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury stuff. And I don't know, just combining that stuff with the old horror fantasy from the pulp stuff and old school sci-fi, I was like, okay, I felt more confident that I could stretch out the story a bit and actually build upon it, because I'm like, okay, just do that. And so I found this one method, and I think I forget exactly who it is. I think he might have actually done a book series that's kind of been lampooned a little bit, but his method really worked, and it was basically like, and I recommend it. I think it's great for people maybe to give it a shot, because it's how I structured it. Because I find one of the biggest things for me before is I would just write, and with a short story I feel like I can just write, not think about it, see where it goes, and that's cool. But yeah, I feel like you got to plan things out a little bit. And for me, it was like, well, you just have the basic structure of like, you say, okay, what's the story you want to write in like a sentence, and then a paragraph, and then can you break it into 5 paragraphs, identify your main characters, who they are, what they want, what they have to do, and then like what their motivations are, get those done, and then you kind of just like flesh out from that 5 paragraphs, break it down by chapters is what I did. Like, okay, establish here, meet here, they do this, they do that, they have to get this thing, and with the fantasy structure, I think it's very simple to do that. And I think that's why I decided to do it that way, because I'm like, okay, what is the probably the most traditional, easy story structure. And I'm like, okay, do a traditional fantasy. And yeah, I've done it a lot in D&D, and I've seen it done in D&D, but use that template and flesh it out your own way, and that's kind of what I did. And so once I had the template and I knew what happened in the story in a general details, I'm like, okay, well, I just have to do it and flesh it out and see how it goes from there. And that's pretty much how it happened. But it was really kind of through Robert E. Howard and reading and imitating and just sort of developing some of my own characters sort of like that kind of got me into the tone of those stories. And I even had a character that I made that's a very Solomon Kane-esque character that you can read about on my website if you want, but I'll probably put some of his stories in that compilation eventually. But yeah, so that's pretty much the backstory of that. Was like I just was working on it, and it took me about, like I said, it took me almost a year. I think it was literally like 8 or 9 months, because I think it was later in the summer 2019, and then I finished it some point in 2020 around the summer, but I think it was like 8 or 9 months. I think it was about 9 months, and then I took a break, I think it's September, and I didn't look at it for like a month, and then I'm like, okay, well, I got to go back and do this, and then I just basically spent pretty much up through March, just kind of slowly, like, and I also another big thing I'd recommend for people writing is the big thing for me was was always being disciplined to do it. And if I had downtime, maybe on a work day, and or something, then I would take time to write a little bit. And whether it was a page or a paragraph or a sentence or two, I made sure I wrote pretty much every day. I gave myself a couple days, here and there. Like when I had off, usually I didn't write, for instance. But you figure, usually 5 days or something a week I wrote, basically. And once you got in the habit of it, it wasn't so bad. And then with editing, it was the same way. I admit towards the end with editing, I got like, things were happening that were busy the last couple months, but if I missed a day, I'm like, well, my goal with editing was a little easier. It's like, okay, well, it was a little easier to edit the book and go through it and decide, okay, like, should they say that, flesh that out, try to fix the grammar stuff. Hopefully I got most of them. I'm sure I missed a few, but yeah, most of that was easier because it was like, my goal was, okay, since you know basically what the story is, like, try to see if you can edit a page a day. And so roughly I did that. And if I missed a day, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to do 2 pages today. And I probably could have done it a little quicker, but I wanted to keep in the zone and not force myself. So, yeah. I think that's about all I wanted to say about the history of the Black Tree, if anybody's curious. So that was kind of my origin of getting into the writing process of it and my inspiration and things that kind of worked for me. Honestly, I think and I might even do a video just about that at some point, just with general tips, because that's one of the things I think about a lot of stuff you might try to do is, it seems a lot harder initially, but starting in smaller steps really makes it seem more possible. Like the idea of writing a book, writing a novel, even though this wasn't super long, it felt like it took a while. It's decent and decent length, I guess, and it's hard to believe, but I'm like, well, at the beginning it seemed like it was impossible, but by writing short stories and feeling more and more comfortable and enjoying that and wanting to move on from that enough, it's like, okay, a novel didn't seem as daunting, and now it's like that I did one. I'm like, I know I want to try to improve upon it and do better, and I'm like, there's more stories I want to write, and like I could see myself doing another one or several more. It's just like, it's a cool thing, and it's just weird. But yeah, I wanted to let you all know about that just because I thought might be interesting, food for thought, if you were curious about like why I wrote this thing or why I pushed it so much. But yeah, I'll probably do a few more videos about it, maybe to keep pushing it, and then I might do more short story stuff and try to get that out there. And then I do have another novel idea, but that's going to be down the line because I know this next year or two is going to be busy for me. But I know I got to write those ideas down. Write down those ideas, So, all right, everybody, that's it. Once again, book is out there. Should be available on Amazon. So feel free to check it out. Let me know what you think and give me some feedback. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day and stay magical.